This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
Claire, I'm not sure if Taylor Swift at the US Open, Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris, or Taylor Swift at the VMAs was the biggest story this week. But it was one of those, I'm sure.
And not just the Taylor Swift parts of
No,
either.
we'll talk about all of those, but we won't talk about Taylor Swift much, actually. We won't talk about the VMAs much. We will be heavy on debate, plus what that announcement by the government to put an age limit on social media means, and why the protests in Melbourne this week are significant.
Yep, and in what's coming up, we'll get you sorted for the footy finals, and the Murdoch's family trust court case begins.
Let's do it. The most clicked link in our Squiz Today newsletter came from yesterday's edition, Claire. It was a comprehensive gallery from the MTV Video Music Awards, the VMAs. I think we said last week, of all the sort of music events and awards events, this is the wackiest, I reckon.
Yep, the wackiest. It's the fun one. And it's the one with the most daring outfits. I think that's probably why we gravitate towards it to see exactly what goes down. We've got a link in the episode notes. You can peruse that at some point over the weekend. It's a Vogue gallery, so it is very extensive. It's also an occasion that has seen its share of controversies over the years. We won't go down that rabbit hole of Kanye West and...
What was the more recent controversy?
Oh, gee, there's so many.
Yeah, there's often like someone stands up and says something inappropriate, or there's a protest, or there's a... Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
They're wearing something that's a protest.
Someone kisses... Someone kissed an alien, Sabrina Carpenter, this awards. That was like a bit of a thing.
I don't know if that falls in the controversy category.
It's very performative.
Spoiler alert, it wasn't a real alien, I don't think.
That would have been a big deal. Anyway, go on, we have.
Yeah. But look, probably the headline is just how dominant Taylor Swift was. She took home the top award of the night, which was for Video of the Year. That was for Fortnite, which featured also Post Malone.
Yeah, she won 6 other categories, including Artist of the Year. She gave her boyfriend, Travis Kelce, a shout out. That got the crowd cheering. That made lots of news.
It really did, because it's probably the first time I think he's even had that shout out.
Maybe,
My boyfriend Travis, certainly in that kind of formal setting anyway. I see he's back playing football and he's got a new haircut that's a bit controversial.
I didn't know about the haircut. What's that about?
It's a look.
Okay.
People have views.
See, to the US Open point, they went to the US Open earlier in the week.
He had a big bucket hat on.
He had a bucket hat on for that, so I wasn't sure about the haircut thing. Okay, we've gone a lot deeper on Taylor Swift than we promised. Sorry. But Taylor Swift was big news this week. The biggest story of the week, though, and I guess it is a nice segue because it was the presidential debate, particularly one of the news items was Taylor Swift coming out in support of Kamala Harris after that debate.
Yeah, so what she said in an Instagram post, it wasn't that long after the debate had wrapped up, is that there's a lot of information on social media pointing to her support potentially going towards Donald Trump.
Or either way.
So she said, look, it's on me to be really clear about where I am. She says she's going to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. On Harris, she says she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. And on Walz, she said that he's someone, and this is the quote, he's been standing up for LGBTQ plus rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body for decades.
I thought the interesting part was less about why. I mean, I don't think we ever thought she was going to come out and support Donald Trump, to be honest. But
probably put money on that not happening, yeah.
But possibly more about the fact that she's like, there is so much misinformation. And we're going to talk about misinformation a bit later in the podcast, but there's so much out there about me, deep fake, saying that I'm supporting this person or that person. The only source of truth is me, hence why I feel like I need to say this. She has 284 million followers on Instagram. Not all of those are eligible to vote in America. Of course, I think I'm one of them. I'm not voting. But there are already reports of the impact that post has had. She provided a link to vote.gov. It generated over 400,000 visitors, 27,000 new voter registrations, and more than 80,000 people who verified their registration status. I thought the numbers might actually be bigger than that.
That was only 24 hours though.
Okay.
And of course, these things have a cumulative effect. And look, 27,000 new voter registrations. It might not sound like a lot, but these key swing states, just keep in mind, I think it was Arizona, it was only won by about 10,000 votes. So these are tight races, and as they say in these sorts of things, every vote counts.
Could have said that with you. As for the debate itself, Trump was a known quantity. We've seen him in a number of presidential debates now. It was Kamala Harris who had sort of everything to prove, I guess. It was high pressure stakes because look what happened after the last debate.
It's a good one to point to. So the last debate, that was, of course, President Joe Biden against Donald Trump, pretty much ended his campaign.
Yeah.
It was that stark image of him really fuddling his way through that started the end. And look, it's why these moments create so much attention. They're a really intense test for the candidates. And you're right, when it comes to Harris, the big problem for her is that about 30 to 40% of voters are saying at the moment, when it comes to the polls anyway, they don't know enough about her.
Yeah, I kind of understand that. Plenty of Americans were keen to find out. 67.1 million people watched the debate. That's a huge number, which was significantly higher than the 51 million who tuned into the June debate, that Biden-Trump debate. What commentators are saying is they saw a very tense debate.
And lots of stagecraft that was deployed during that. The way that Harris came steaming out, she was determined to get a handshake.
She walked right over to his side of the stage and shook his hand.
I cannot tell you how much has been written about in the prelude to it. Would she go and have a handshake? Would he go and have a handshake? Would there be a handshake at all? There hasn't been a handshake in the debate since 2016. So,
there sure was one.
If
you haven't seen that, it's really worth a look. They had a little exchange when they shook hands. She said, "Let's have a good debate." He said, "Have fun."
Have fun. Yep.
I would say something like that. He probably didn't know what to say.
But interesting too, because it's the first time they'd met in person.
I didn't realise this.
Yeah. It's kind of wild, isn't it? Because you think two people who have been at the top of US politics for quite a significant period of time, including campaigning against one another in the last presidential campaign in 2020, that they hadn't come across each other.
Yeah, from there, the summary, I guess, on the debate is that Trump didn't say anything that would surprise most people who've watched him for the last 8 years. The exception was he refused to rule out signing a national abortion ban. That was a bit of a headline item post-debate. Abortion, of course, is a big and interesting issue in this election, you'd think. Or I guess many people would think he'd be doing a bit of a victory lap on the removal of access in many parts of the country, but that's not the case.
No, of course, in the last bit of time, there's been the Roe versus Wade decision being overturned, lots of states moving to restrict access. Of course, Donald Trump and the Republicans have really been underneath all of that. But no, not the case. And what reports say is that actually he's being very careful around these things. He fundamentally believes, according to reports anyway, that it's an issue that could actually beat him in this election. It could see him lose the election. So there's a lot of care about that. I reckon over the coming weeks we'll probably be talking about that a bit more.
He kept saying that he's very comfortable with it being a state-by-state decision. I guess the other point is that Donald Trump did struggle with being disciplined for how long did it actually? I watched
90 minutes.
Yeah, I watched an hour.
Watched an hour. Yeah.
And I think that was about it for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, he did struggle with that point.
He does, and
he does, and he did. Yes,
that's sort of on the way he goes and has done in the past. What Harris showed though was that she could needle him really, really effectively. So she was on the offensive for most of the debate. That probably surprised a lot of people, but it was the prosecutor background. She's a former prosecutor from California, really got Trump's hackles up on a number of occasions. She said that people leave his rallies, that they're coming to see him and then they're leaving early because they're exhausted or bored.
He didn't like that.
He didn't like that. He had to respond to that. He said that no one goes to her rallies. Then he very angrily sort of moved on to these immigration issues, and it's probably one of the things that you might have heard out of this. He brought up rumours that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating pet cats and dogs.
That was a moment. That was the moment even, perhaps, from the debate. It saw moderator David Muir interject, saying the town's city manager said there was no credible allegation that any pets had been killed. Donald Trump said that well, that's what the mayor says, but,
Yep.
that's not what I'm hearing. It went kind of back and forth. It was weird.
It's a weird moment.
It was a weird
sure,
moment.
in a national presidential debate. That fact-checking, though, happened quite a bit throughout this debate. So if you're a Trump supporter, your response to that is the debate was actually 3-on-1. So Harris and the two moderators versus Donald Trump. But the point, I guess, it's less than 8 weeks until the vote. It's not about what the candidate's supporters think. It's actually about this big group of undecided voters.
Yeah, those people that say they aren't sure who Kamala Harris is and they're not sure if they want to vote for Donald Trump. Those are the people they're trying to talk to. The first big poll since the debate came out yesterday. It's from Reuters Ipsos. It put Harris ahead. 53% said she won the debate. 24% said Trump won. The rest saying neither had or they didn't answer the question, which... There you go. Sure.
Don't know.
Dunno.
It's really about a quarter-ish of voters in America, and getting their gauge about where they might fall is going to be really important in all of this.
Yeah, as for what's next, there might not be another debate. Trump said yesterday that he clearly won this week and that he's done.
Yep. And look, there was a lot of back and forth on getting to this one, so let's just see how that pans out.
Let's wrap up some other big news this week. There was a lot going on in Canberra. You were there.
I was there.
In Parliament House.
That wasn't the big news.
It's big news for me.
Big news for me too.
Yeah.
So I was with the Digital Publishers Alliance. We've talked about them before. It's the group of independent publishers who are really concerned about things like the News Media Bargaining Code, also where Meta is at, whether they're going to pay for the content, the news content that they have on their apps. Of course, a question about whether they will ban news on Instagram, Facebook, where that's all up to. So we were looking really to move that discussion forward. It's been 6 months since all of that bubbled up, which seems extraordinary.
Yeah. If you think, oh, yeah, I've heard you guys talk about this, but we thought it might have been dealt with. No, it is not.
Dealt with yet. No. So really, I guess, in this whole sort of bucket of issues that are coming about social media, news, tech,
misinformation,
and disinformation, scams, all of that kind of stuff. There was a decision this week by the government to put in place age verification for social media.
Yeah, that was a big news story this week. That was confirmed by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese after the Coalition committed to it earlier this year, and the e-Safety Commissioner recommended it last year.
Yeah, so there's a long tail to this debate. Pressure also coming from the states. It's been bubbling up, but it really came to a head on Monday. There was the South Australian Premier, Peter Malinauskas. He was out on Monday talking about his move to introduce these sort of social media bans. He's picked the age of 14 for that age limit to come in. Victoria's on board with that. New South Wales is also involved in this space.
Yeah, so what the federal government has announced, because it's so present for so many people in their homes, like this idea that their kids have access to social media and should they or shouldn't they, and how can you possibly ban it?
It's a barbecue stopper.
We're probably not going to be able to answer a lot of that here, but we are going to tell you where it's up to at the very least. So what they've announced is that it's a trial of age assurance technology, which will be used to enforce the social media age ban for children between 13 and 16 years old. We don't know what the tech is yet. It's up for tender.
Yep.
We don't know if it's going to be administered by the tech companies or by the government. We don't know any of those details yet or how it would work. It is literally the announcement of a trial. We don't know the age limit and we don't know the start date.
There's a few questions, right?
Yeah.
As to how this is all going to go down. So that really saw the coalition go after Anthony Albanese. How can you have an age verification scheme or even a trial when you don't know what age you're going to do it?
And just to reiterate, they've said 16. The coalition has said 16.
They've said 16.
Yeah.
That's where they're at. So where the government's at is somewhere between sort of 14 and 16. How, as you said, Kate, how they're going to do it, also unknown. You can make the social media platforms responsible for checking. That's one way to do it. Of course, if you're Meta, that's not what you want to do. You want to make the point of where the app is downloaded the point of verification. So that would be like in the Apple Store or the Google App Store, that kind of thing. So lots of questions about exactly how it's going to work.
Yeah, and I guess also privacy. Are you going to require ID? What proof are you going to give? How we're going to submit our credentials to prove our age? Where is that then stored? This brings up a lot of questions. All of those are still to be answered.
And also, of course, what counts as a social media platform.
There's so many of them.
Yeah, because there's lots of things where we interact with and put public and publicly access information as well, that questions about what's appropriate for kids.
Yeah, it's, as you say, a bit of a barbecue stopper, but that is where we're at this point in time. They did say that they want to have more answers to this by the end of the year, and then the trial starting in 2025. Before we move on from Canberra, I think we should talk about aged care reform. They were agreed on Thursday, those reforms. They're big.
Yeah, really big. Once in a generation reforms, the government said. The headline from it is that self-funded retirees, some self-funded retirees and part pensioners, when they're entering the scheme, so not people who are in there at the moment, but new entrants into aged care, they will pay more. And given that, I was a bit surprised to see so many stakeholders lining up saying they welcome the reforms.
Yeah, so this was a bipartisan agreement between the opposition and the government. They agreed on these reforms. It seems to have been widely welcomed. I'm sure as this shakes out, there'll be people that have criticisms of it. But I guess it hasn't come out of nowhere. There's been lots of discussions about how to do this, a lot of conversations about the pressure that aged care is under. A lot of conversations about how we're all getting older.
Yeah.
There was some remarkable stat about how many of us will be aged 85 and over in the coming couple of decades.
We're getting older.
We're getting older. So shoring it up for the long term has been an important part of what this government's trying to do.
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, underneath all of the numbers and the dollars, the idea is actually to shift more support for older people to stay in their homes so that they don't have to go into residential care where things do get quite tricky, that people do want to stay at home. So making that possible for as long as possible is the goal. And for those who do need residential care, there's a maximum price that would be indexed for the cost of that care.
I feel like we need a shortcut on this potentially.
I think that's right.
Because you kind of need to understand, and a lot of people listening will understand when they've dealt with, elderly parents and they've had people in aged care, they'll understand the system. You need to understand what currently happens to understand the changes, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also an additional 15% pay increase for aged care workers paid for by taxpayers. That happened in the middle of last year.
Yeah, so a lot of focus on that sector, that's for sure.
Down to Melbourne, and this week, Claire, there's been an expo on, the Land Forces Expo, to abbreviate it. It's basically a chance for defence and weapons companies from around the world to present all of their products.
Yep. It's weird to think of weapons as products, isn't it? But that, of course, is exactly what it is. It's the kind of event that can attract, it certainly has in the past, but it certainly did this time, anti-war protesters, those who say that they oppose the companies and also governments profiting from war. And given the climate at the moment, of course, around protesters, specifically pro-Palestinian protesters who are really calling for that free Palestine.
Yeah, I read police were expecting up to 25,000 protesters. Reading reports, it was a lot less than that, about 1,500, so nowhere near as big as expected. But they did say it would be peaceful. It turned out to be not that.
No, it did not. So delegates coming and going were targeted. Some were physically assaulted. Police then responded. 24 of them were injured. They had feces, cans, food, acids thrown at them. Things were set on fire. Shane Patton, who's the head of the police there, he said that they were not peaceful protesters. They're hypocrites.
Yeah, the protesters, though, argue the police escalated it first, and that's a conversation that's being had. Whatever the case, it was really ugly. Dozens of people were arrested. It's all very tense too because the national terrorism threat was raised recently to probable, so from possible to probable, as was the threat in Victoria.
Yeah, and before this event, the Victorian government also gave police powers under the Terrorism Community Protection Act. So, for example, that makes it an offence to hinder a search or to fail to comply with a direction to remove a face covering.
Yeah, and I guess to finish, day 2 of the Expo was much more subdued, actually. Just 150 protesters, mostly peaceful, nothing like what we saw on Wednesday. Let's talk about the Royals.
It's an obvious thing to move on to, isn't it? But wow, what a huge news story to wake up to when we saw the Princess of Wales. An extraordinary video.
A highly produced video.
Highly produced.
I would say highly produced.
Look, I don't want to be a critic of these things, and I'm not a critic. I quite it was interesting to watch. those sort of little awkward moments between her and
You don't
William
like
lying down on a rug so naturally.
Claire doesn't really like warm and fuzzy things like that.
Well, that's true. That is very true. Probably my opportunity to enjoy those things is limited.
Some might say very moving.
Very moving, and look, incredible things like, she's talking about, helping hands across people's cancer journeys just as the hand is sort of scraping along the wheat. Looked quite impressive.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful message. There's no doubt about that. And there's plenty of people who are really happy that she's on the road to recovery.
Yeah, she talked about her cancer journey. She said she's done her chemotherapy, and though her path to recovery continues, she'll be doing more public engagements in the coming months. And how about King Charles? That was a good video. People might have missed. This is actually my recommendation. We're getting ahead of it.
Yes. Do you want to leave it till then?
No, we can talk about
do it now. King Charles had a reception with the Kiwi women's rugby team. One very cheekily asked, "Can I give you a hug?"
And they all gave him a hug.
They all gave him a hug. Talked about it being knocked over in a scrum.
He said he was flattened.
It
was so much more
very
gentle and warm than that, but it is a really lovely, lovely video that's worth a look. I'll pop a link to that in your episode notes. Claire, in what's coming up, big weekend for AFL and NRL fans. I'm very excited for this weekend. This is the time of year where I just get on board with any game.
And I watched probably my third or fourth AFL game of the season, which is
Sydney.
Sort of on par, Sydney and GWS. It was an incredible game.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I heard you talk about that on Squiz today.
Yeah.
Obviously, the final season for both codes is in full swing. In the AFL, it's semi-finals, so elimination round, sudden death. Hawthorn played Port Adelaide last night. Don't know what happened because we're recording this on a Friday.
Do you want to pick a winner?
Hawthorn probably.
Look, Alice would like Port Adelaide to win.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
We've got friends who are very tied up with Hawthorn. I'm a bit torn on this, so I'll go with Alice. Go Port Adelaide.
GWS Giants take on the Brisbane Lions tonight in the other game. The winners of those will play Geelong and Sydney next week respectively. Over in the NRL, their final season kicked off last night. The Panthers versus Sydney Roosters. Again, don't know who won. We're recording this before the game. Can't tell you the winner. Other teams in the finals, Melbourne Storm, Cronulla Sharks, Cowboys, Newcastle Knights, the Bulldogs and the Manly Sea Eagles.
I'm glad you covered that off. You're way more literate in NRL than I am.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it.
What's the game to watch this weekend?
I don't know. Actually, I mean, for me, I live with a whole bunch of Manly fans. So
okay.
They've got to win.
Yeah, you go.
So 4 o'clock on Sunday.
Radio. On Sunday, it's Prince Harry's 40th birthday, which means he's in for some money.
Yeah, not as much as I thought. $14 million.
I'd be pretty happy with that.
Not bad.
I'm in royal terms. You'd probably want a bit more.
We learnt that from our shortcut this week on the royal family. Also, we learnt that he'll be inheriting more than Prince William.
Look, there's some sort of behind intergenerational wheeling and dealing on all of that. The Queen Mother, so his grandmother, if you want to know why, go and listen to the shortcut.
Yeah, that's mean.
It's a teaser, isn't it?
I feel like that's so mean to make people do that. But it is a great shortcut and you just have to search for Squiz Shortcuts in your podcast app and you'll learn all about the royal family's wealth.
Yep.
So a bit of a royal week for us here at the Squiz. Shifting gears to another very, very wealthy family, the Murdochs. Early Tuesday, our time, evidentiary hearings. You'll tell me what that means.
That's a hard word to say, isn't
Evidentiary hearings in the Murdoch Family Trust court case start.
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, actually, we had the link in News Club around big sort of breaking, interesting stories. The New York Times exposed that case because it was actually all happening behind closed doors. So what we know now, a 2-week court case will decide who will control the Murdoch media empire when Rupert Murdoch dies. If you're a Succession fan, of course, this is sort of where it all comes together. We're talking about, of course, in that empire, News Corp has the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, also the Times in the UK when it comes to print media. There's also Fox Corporation, which does a lot more in entertainment. So these are very big, very significant companies.
And obviously all the titles here in Australia too.
Exactly right, yeah. So as it stands, when Rupert dies, his voting rights are split between his 4 eldest children, Lachlan, James, Prudence and Elizabeth. Of course, There's 2 other children that he had with Wendy Deng. They've got different voting rights and different access into the trust. Anyway, put all that aside. For decades, it's really been a sort of move towards Lachlan, who is now running that part of it. The case is going to determine whether that's actually okay.
Yeah, so he has to prove, Rupert Murdoch has to prove that he's acting in good faith and that it benefits all his heirs. If you're wondering why he wants to make the change, the speculation is that Lachlan's sort of more in line with Rupert's conservative political views than his siblings, so he's more likely to keep those media outlets on the same political path. That's no secret. James has come out and said he doesn't agree with the direction some of the Murdoch titles have taken.
Yeah, and it's not just about having family harmony or where views are lining up. It's about their business model. So who is best placed to actually continue that business model that they've developed, which is really giving loud voices to conservative voices?
So this is a private hearing as it stands right now, but like so many people are going to be watching this to see what actually unfolds. You and I both watched the Australian Story part 1 of that series on ABC, which is about Lachlan Murdoch. 2 and 3 are to come. It's a bit loaded, but it certainly is a good background to the Murdoch empire, how it began and Lachlan's part in it. So could be worth a look.
Yes, most definitely. If you're into that kind of stuff, get into that. Also, what's happening on Tuesday, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is speaking at the Business Council of Australia's big annual dinner. That is always a big keynote address. Of course, the business community really wanting to hear where the Albanese government is going as we head to this part of the election cycle.
Can we say that any more frequently? We'll try not to say election cycle next week.
Have to put a quota on that, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. Thursday, it's game 1 of a 3-part netball series between Australia and England. That's kicking off in Adelaide at 7 p.m. You can watch that on KO. Friday is the last day of Term 3 for schools in Victoria, WA and the Northern Territory. Squiz recommends, Claire. I mean, we've recommended the Australian Story series. We've also recommended that video of Charles, so I think I'm done.
You're done? Okay. It's a good one. I watched, and did you watch the whole thing?
Yeah.
The Perfect Couple?
I did.
You weren't huge into it?
I wouldn't recommend it.
I would, which is why it's in recommendations.
Okay, you want to have this right?
Not really. I think people can have different views on these things,
of course
right?
They can.
It's not about whether you're right and whether I'm wrong.
No, but I do think it's good to – I think a lot of people have seen this pop up on Netflix. It's the Nicole Kidman show.
Yep.
It's like a bit of a thriller.
Liev Schreiber.
Yeah. You know, I don't know the others.
A lot of people you'd recognise.
Dakota Fanning.
Yeah.
No, I just like I like to recommend things I really, really liked. Yeah. And I just thought it was okay.
Didn't really like it.
Yeah.
I really liked it. Oh. Is it the best thing I've ever seen? Absolutely not.
Okay.
But I still got a good bit of value out of it. One of the things I thought was really interesting, and I didn't quite realise it, Eve Hewson, who is one of the main characters, she plays Amelia. She's Bono's daughter.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Me neither.
No idea.
And she was really huge in one of my favourite shows from last year, which was Bad Sisters on Apple.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch that either.
I think you'd probably enjoy that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think with our recommendations, it's good to say if we're a bit circumspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it is that second.
Claire really liked
it. It was time well spent for me.
It was time well spent. Okay, There you go. I thought it was a bit of rubbish.
It is on that. Yeah. Look, it's easy. It's like a beach read.
It's exactly like that. Yeah. Which actually isn't a bad recommendation if you put it that way. Yeah. No. Okay. The Perfect Couple. I think it's a great thing to talk about because I think a lot of people, as I said, will have seen it pop up and gone, oh, should I or shouldn't I?
Yeah.
You can make up your own mind based on what we've just said.
Give it a go, I reckon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Weekly Wrap. We'll be, of course, back next week, Claire.
We will.
Looking forward to it. In the meantime, if you're enjoying the Weekly Wrap, please let people know. And we mentioned last week that if you're listening on Spotify's Daily Drive, we might not be there for that much longer. So make sure you hit follow.
Yeah. Hit follow. We'll be there for you.